Hello and welcome to this special edition of the ILEETA Learning Lab. My name is Joe Willis. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for ILEETA, the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association, and we have an annual conference in St. Louis each year. This year it's March 16th through the 21st, and I'm here today to talk to Kim Schlau. Now, she's one of our presenters for this year's conference, but Kim, you've presented almost every year that I can think of, and you always do such a phenomenal job. And one of the things you are really good at is communicating through story. And so this year you are talking about that specifically. Your class is Once Upon a Crime, the Art of Storytelling in Police Training. I'm super excited. I can't wait to learn more about the details in that. And then ultimately how you came to this being your presentation topic. So right over to you. Tell us what we're going to get.
Well, hi, and thank you for having me. Yes, I enjoy ILEETA. It is one of my things that is always on my calendar that I always look forward to reconnecting with all the past and new instructors and being able to present there as well. And yes, this year my class is Once Upon a Crime, the Art of Storytelling in Police Training, but also can apply to other parts of your life as well. Communicating with friends, with family, with coworkers, things like that.
I love it. And so let me ask, ultimately, and I do want you to dive into a little bit of your background in storytelling. You were very involved in Below 100, which, that initiative, I believe, had a direct impact. We're still trying to understand how this year, 2025, we actually did meet that objective of having under 100 line of duty deaths. But you were involved from the beginning, which is an initiative that actually started at the ILEETA conference. And storytelling was a big part of that for you. And so if you don't mind, kind of tell us how you evolved to being realizing that storytelling was a big part of training.
Sure. Well, when you have a story that you feel can impact people, you want to share it. My story being the deaths of my oldest two daughters due to the actions of a Illinois State police officer. Their deaths were preventable. There was high speed, there was distracted driving, there were other things involved in that crash. And so being able to share that story in a way that brings my kids back to life. I get to show pictures and tell stories, funny little stories about my girls is always that's a parent's that's what parents love to do, is talk about their kids and show pictures of them. So I get to do that, and I get to do it also in a way that hopefully impacts how people behave behind the wheel. Don't drive fast when you don't have to. Don't be distracted. Wear your seatbelt, wear the safety equipment, especially for law enforcement, wearing that safety equipment that allows them to survive these types of crashes, because people are going to crash. You when you're a police officer and you're in your car 90% of your job time, you could possibly crash. But telling people how to avoid that is saving lives. And that ties into how Below 100, which is the not-for-profit training working to keep preventable officer deaths under 100, a number that had, up until 2025, not been seen since 1943. As a Below 100 participant and instructor, I think I speak for all of the Below 100 instructors. We're thrilled, but that's still too many to lose. 97 was not a goal. Obviously, 0 is the goal, but we know that that's not an attainable goal. But those officers that were killed, we will still honor them and tell their stories and work to keep what's happening, not an anomaly, but have that continue and keep those officer deaths low.
Yeah, and then it is that the preventable ones. I mean, obviously, the world gets a vote. The bad guys get a vote. The universe gets a vote. Nature gets a vote. Not everything is truly preventable, but what is, clearly Below 100's done some amazing work in communicating that. When it comes to story, though, when I've seen you present, your story. It is a compelling story. It's powerful. It's gripping, right? Like the details are there. You've brought tears to audiences, but it's not just simply conveying the story. It is the training outcomes, the intentional objective definitions, and knowing what it is you want the story to convey. I often see times where storytellers will get up there and simply convey their woes and pass to the audience the trauma or the their negative experience, and leave the audience often wondering, well, what the hell do I do with this now? Right?
Right.
What makes a good story good training?
I guess at its basic level, a story has to have something that happened. You talk about why it happened, and then you leave your audience with the so what now? What do we do next? And delivering it at that level. And then you go back and refine number one and number two and keep going with number three. That's kind of what mine does. I talk about what happened. My girls were killed. Why did it happen? Because of the actions of this officer that should not have been happening. What did we learn from that? Where do we go from there? Agencies have changed their speed policy. They've changed their pursuit policy. They've, made policies about using electronics and behind the wheel and things like that. That's where my story keeps training going. So that is, yeah. So you're talking about somebody standing up there and saying, "This is how it's always been. We hate it. Well, change it." Well, we hate change. Okay, what do we do? So you have to, not only are you going to put something out there, but you kind of have to give maybe not the solution, but some avenues for solution. Because again, each one of us is different. Each one of us processes things and goes through things and does our work differently than somebody else. So if this isn't necessarily a problem in this agency, but maybe this is, can you take what I've said here and apply it to what is an issue?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I think it really just kind of humanizes the lesson to be learned, right? Because so many times in instructional design, we get the great learning objectives on a slide, and here are the three things we're going to cover, and they may be really well worded, blooms to the finest point of the definition, stated outcomes, but at the end of the day, when we can connect emotionally with people, and that's essentially what story does, right? It's that emotional connection is
Sure.
where the difference is made. So when you're teaching this class, what is it that I'm going to walk away with as a participant? I mean, just kind of give me a rundown.
Sure. So what I'd like is for people to understand what the key elements of the storytelling are and how we can relate those to our training, which is what we talked about, the why, what happened, why it happened, and what we learned from it and how we're passing that along. I also want to cover narrative structure and comprehension and retention. As you mentioned, emotion, personalization. If I walk into a room of people that can't connect to what I'm saying on any level, then I'm not going to be effective. But most people have children. Most people drive. Most people have a cell phone. There's always elements in there that people can connect to, and that's what you want to hit them on, that emotional level. Do they have children? How would they feel if this happened to them? Using that as an example. And then you also want to talk about using your fact based versus your story based. Obviously, all stories are rooted in some kind of truth, but as we know, the legends grow, and sometimes things get blown out of proportion, things get added, which is not a bad thing. Every story has a kernel of truth to it. So being able to still maintain your factual basis and being able to add in those fun little elements, some humor, maybe some emotion, those types of things. And then using your real life experiences, framing those in a way that affect people and can connect with people, teaching people how to do this. We're going to have a little workshopping in it where you kind of take in little groups, and you're going to take a story. It may be something I give you that you have to frame a narrative around, or it may be something that somebody suggests. I haven't decided on that yet, so that's a surprise. That's why you need to come. And then finally, using these scenarios in your training, when they're effective, when they might not be effective, and how to give people the tools to be able to use that in their day-to-day communication with other people as well, not just on a training level, but talking to other people, talking to your family, talking to your friends, that type of thing.
I like that. It's transferable, and I like that as a goal. I mean, that's definitely a worthwhile pursuit. So let me ask you, what we've all been to those courses where the instructor will stand up there and one war story after another, string them together somehow to the point where we know all about this person's life and their exploits and all the great things they've done. But I'm still curious what it is I'm supposed to learn. What differentiates a war story from good training storytelling, in your opinion?
I would say that if you've got a good war story that embodies the what happened, why it happened, and what we learned from it, then you can use that. I think the goal of that, though, is to learn how to take the high points of it and be able to just deliver those high points. There are people, we all know them, that you ask them what time it is and they tell you how to build a grandfather clock.
Right.
That's kind of what we don't want to get overly, storytelling. We want to stick to back to Dragnet, just the facts, man. But sometimes you do have to add a little bit more in there just to keep your audience's attention. So if you're talking about something that is inherently kind of dry, case law, for example, as a former paralegal, case law can be kind of dry. But if you're adding in some stories, if you have some pieces of the testimony, or if you have an incident that happens that you can relate that case law to and use that incident as your story, then you can build from there.
Yeah, I think, that's, you take something like case law, and first of all, that can be incredibly dry. But on the other hand, these are real lives that ultimately resulted in these massive landmark court decisions, right? Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, real life, real court process, real decisions, real change. And at the end of the day, being able to capture attention. So you've said a couple of things that I want to kind of highlight and underscore here. Attention and retention are two major outcomes that you're trying to get after with story. And that's done through emotional connection, right?
Right.
And so tips on for those who may not make it to your presentation, whether they make it to the conference or not, which, by the way, if you're on the fence, get to the conference.
Please come.
Yeah, please come. But for those who may not, how do we develop a story that genuinely makes that emotional connection? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Again, you using well, I mean, I always use my story as an example because it's my story.
Sure.
And me standing up there talking about, the day that my kids were killed and how I and their family and their sister processed that, plus processing that through all of the legalese that we went through and the time and things like that. I do kind of condense that down, but I do talk about my kids, and I start with a picture of my girls, and there's a wording over it that says, how would you feel as a parent? And then it talks about what would you do if you opened up the door and you saw a police officer standing there to tell you your kids weren't coming home because of someone that someone that you worked with, another police officer. How would you feel? And that grabs the audience right then, because that makes them get involved, and they're like, wow, I have kids, or wow, I have nieces or nephews or grandchildren, or something. Even if you don't have kids, you still feel that.
I've done a death notification to parents, right? Like I can put myself in any of these roles.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
So then, because I say it like that, and yes, my story was very high profile, people retain that. People are like, oh, I remember hearing about that, even though it was good Lord, almost 18 years ago, but it doesn't change the impact of that story. So you could talk about an incident that happened, 18 months ago, 18 years ago, or whatever, as long as that still applies to what we are talking about in whatever training we're trying to do. If that still applies, then talk about it. And the retention of it is because of that emotional kick. It is because you have a personal, there's something personal that you can relate to in this. There's something in there that grabbed you. Obviously, if you're a police officer, the actions of another police officer like that, people kind of are like, wow, that's kind of crappy. Let's not be that guy. Or as a parent or as someone who has lost someone else, I've had so many people come up and say, I lost a family member in a crash, a DUI crash, a distracted driving crash, something like that. So there's so many levels that people can relate to. You just kind of have to know your audience, and if you're going into a class um, of young officers, they may not be married yet, they may not have kids yet, but they may have nieces or nephews or siblings, so you can hit them on that level.
Yeah, got it. And I think that's, pulling from that, it's that relatability piece, right? So put yourself in one of these places. You also mentioned something a couple of times, and I didn't catch it till this last time you said it, was the imagery that you use is tied visually to the words you're saying.
Yeah.
And at ILEETA, across the association, whether it's at the conference or throughout the year, we really try to highlight that big pictures, little words on our slides, and you are the presentation. That's just support behind you.
Right.
Your storytelling is even more of an example of that. How important is it for you to use visual imagery?
Very. And I will talk about using visualizations, using images, how to use good images, and not putting up a bunch of text on your screen, and using just those pictures that allow your audience to look at the picture, see what they're, and look at that, but also be able to still hear you. Because if you've got a bunch of words up there, they're reading and they're not listening to you. And we cannot split our attention like that. So just using those pictures can really impact somebody. I'll also talk about using music and other things, maybe like scent. There's so many things of storytelling with memory that is fascinating, that I'm having so much fun going down these rabbit holes. And I have to try to bring it all back together, because I don't want it to be, this 5-hour course where I tell you nothing. Like, I have to learn how to drill these things down too. But it is fascinating on how we retain that information. And that's what we want our audience to do. We want to get their attention, and then we want them to remember what we're saying. So giving them that hook at the beginning, giving them the information in the middle, and then wrapping it up at the end and tying everything together. That's the trick. And so I'm going to teach people how to tie a great big bow.
I love it. And I think that's one of the fun parts for ILEETA instructors. You're very experienced ILEETA cadre, you're there, almost every year teaching. And these passion projects, because that's actually my next question for you, is related to that. These passion projects that we have that really kind of draw us down a path, and we then have to pull it together to actually make a good class out of it. And that's a challenge that so many of us have enjoyed. And if you're sitting on the fence about whether or not to present at ILEETA, but you've got a passion project that you want to get better at and learn to teach better at the same time, ILEETA is a good place to practice it, but only bring your best work, because it's also a very discerning audience. But I will tell you,
if you are coming to ILEETA and you are thinking, I kind of want to teach, but I'm not really sure if it's something, talk to one of the instructors. Talk to an instructor that you admire. All of us want more instructors. We want to help. That's why we do this.
Yeah.
I love coming to the conference. I love teaching at the conference. I love hearing people a week, a year, 2 years later saying, hey, I remember from your class X, or inspiring somebody to teach because of what you talk about. That's the cool thing with ILEETA, is we
I
all
love
want
it.
to help one another.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. And I can, the number of people who, in one way or another, you have personally inspired to come back and teach, right? Because we all have those stories in us and the lessons that we want to teach. And you don't come to ILEETA unless you are an experienced instructor in some way. But getting out of that space where, you actually have taught a class on it where I don't know if I'm ready yet.
Yeah.
Breaking through that barrier, your class on imposter syndrome was a very well received one. And it doesn't matter how good you are, you leave your comfort zone and suddenly the world becomes a very big place around you.
Yeah.
And ILEETA is one of those places, but everybody there wants you to succeed. So why this class? I mean, why is this class important for folks to take?
Well, I think that using stories in training is very important. Because that's how I train. That's how I teach. And as I go to other classes, as I go to different types of instruction, storytelling is always there in one form or another. The instructor may not think they're telling a story, but they are. And so those stories that stick with me, that I have learned from, and that I have gone back to throughout my course career as an instructor, those are the stories that stay with me. So that's what I want people to understand is everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something that is important to them, passion project, as you said. So let's turn that into effective ways to train, because that is, at the end of the day, that's how people are going to learn how to do their job and keep doing it well, is the training. We should always all be learning and always be training and always be expanding out our repertoire on how we can connect with people. That's another piece of this as well, is storytelling that connects us from cave drawings, thousands and thousands of years ago, before written language was a thing. That's how stories were passed down. That's how things are passed down. Not just stories about, fun things, stories about things that could have been prevented, stories that teach us how to do things better, stories that make us want to be better people, those types of things. Those are all very, very important. But it's getting those people's attention, getting them to retain it, and then passing it on and allowing them to create their own stories that they can then use in their training. That's why I want to do this class. Because I've heard some people give some really, really good stories, but they didn't deliver them real well. Or, or they leave me with, oh my gosh, what happened next? That's the hook.
Right.
And then I go up to them afterward and I'm like, hey, what happened with that? And they say, oh my gosh, I didn't finish my story. So you got to start the plane, you got to make the flight, then you got to land the plane. Sometimes people forget that. But that's
Great analogy.
Yeah. But that's how we always want our audience to walk away with the best version of us and make them the best version of the people they can be. And I hope that storytelling can help people do that on both sides.
Yeah, tremendous analogy in there about the flight and takeoff to landing. That story matters, and like you said, the number of times either they don't finish the story or we don't get to the so what to be learned. I think that's the one thing I know you're going to deliver on is the importance of story, but also the how to start and finish it, and then how to make it matter, that it's not just a woe tale, but an actual, this is what to do with it, or a good gunfight story. Everybody loves to hear the details and the how it went, but what do I learn from this? I mean, we can talk about the cool parts separate from here, but what's the story to be taught and learned and finished? So I'm going to break the format just a little bit with you because you are a local area resident expert. You know the area well. Tell us a little bit about the venue and the experience of the ILEETA conference.
Okay. Well, St. Louis is a city that is what now my adopted hometown, and it has some amazing history, amazing things, amazing people. I I just love that people come to Union Station, which is a historic, place in St. Louis. Just walking into the Grand Hall is just, it's hard to explain. It is a huge arched, um, you know, a, To me, it almost like harkens back to those old cathedrals. I've never been to Europe, but that's what that reminds me of, is with the stained glass and the flying buttresses and the architecture and the details and all the fun things. The venue itself is amazing. The surrounding area around it is fabulous. There's all kinds of, if you go hungry at ILEETA, I'm sorry. Come see me. I'll cook you dinner. Like there's so much to eat, so much to do, so many people to talk to, and having the Union Station now, having those other things around it. There's an aquarium. There's a Ferris wheel. There's the rope climbing thing, and just walking outside and looking up at the building. That's what I love, is the old buildings, because I know, again, Europe, they say, their old buildings are like 1,000 years old. And to us, like an old building's like 100 years old. But this architecture, and it harkens back to all of that. And as a big architecture nerd, I just love that. And also that, ILEETA brings a lot to St. Louis. It's tourism, it brings it all in. So if you've never been to St. Louis and you come and you're like, this is kind of a cool area, I'd love to come back. Come back. We have sports. We have soccer. We have hockey. We have baseball. I know baseball and hockey are kind of, yeah, we really do have professional teams. They'll get better. But I'm a huge sports fan. I'm a huge foodie. There's museums. There's so much to do and so much to see. And I know that when you come for ILEETA, you're going to be busy, in there. But if you can take a minute and walk outside, now that the days are staying, light longer, walk outside, get some fresh air, walk around the buildings, kind of look around and see what's out there, because it is an amazing city. And if you need information, let me know, or read my article in the journal that is called "Welcome to St. Louis."
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's become a staple, and I genuinely, it's growing. So that's the cool part about this conference venue and why we keep going back. We're there through 2030. And it's, I mean, guaranteed through 2030. That's how far out we've signed. We may stay longer. It is a wonderful venue and an incredibly safe and inviting place to be. And so, all right, we're going to go ahead and close this out. I want to keep these to about 30 minutes or less. So, Kim, thank you so much for this interview, but also what you do for ILEETA and the ILEETA membership throughout the year, and all of your contributions. Cannot wait to see this class. I think it is going to be one that really resonates with folks who need to.
I hope so. Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to promote it, and I look forward to seeing everybody at ILEETA. And if you need anything, let me know. Yes, I am your local tour guide.
Awesome. Thanks. Stick around. I got a couple other quick questions for you.